Hello and welcome to Chronological Clone Wars presented by the Podawakens. My name is Jordan. With me, as always, on his first watch of the Clone Wars is Logan. How are you, Logan?
Good, Jordan. I was just wondering because I like it feels like you almost just did it. I always wonder because you have so many podcasts. Do you ever have you ever started out one and went, nope, that's not the right podcast?
Yes, I forget which one it was, but there was something I did where I did the wrong intro and I had to reset.
That sounds right.
Um, Usually, though, if I have a guest or like a co-host on, I usually don't. It's more if
Yeah.
I'm like gonna record something solo real quick that I'll get a little confused, and it's just me talking to myself like
Yeah.
expletive. That's the
Yeah.
wrong podcast. Reset.
Right. Welcome to Elseworlds, where we're going to be talking about the new acolyte. Oh wait, no,
Yes.
we're not
Oh
going
no.
to.
Yeah. um. Yeah. So we are diving in here. So I think what we're going to do here is look. I set out on all of this stuff weeks ago, meaning like I wrote the list of episodes that we have a long time ago, almost a year ago, and some of them I got wrong. So there was one like next week we were supposed to talk the disappeared part one and the disappeared part two with the lost one, but the lost one is actually part of the arc with the last three for Yoda. So I decided we're going to talk those four next week, and we will add the disappeared part one and part two to this. You should already know that because that's what it's going to be titled probably on here is like the Clovis arc and disappeared arc is what this episode will be called. So you'll know. But I know last week we only talked about watching the Clovis episodes. The reason for that is one, I messed up, and two, my original thought was, oh, we'll just cover the disappeared as its own arc. Guess what? Not much to talk about on that arc. When you get a Mace Windu Jar Jar arc, it's like, all right, I don't think there's much to do here.
Yeah, two of my favorite
um,
characters. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I was like, this is right up his alley here. But we are talking about an old friend, the Rise of Clovis, and Crisis at Heart. We'll talk about those first, so I'll just give you the information on those. Written by Christian Taylor. An Old Friend was directed by Brian Kalin O'Connell. The Rise of Clovis, directed by Danny Keller. And Crisis at Heart, directed by Stuart Lee. Of course, those all premiered March 7th on Netflix because it was a one-time drop. And the synopsis for An Old Friend. Padme Amidala helps an untrustworthy friend from her past. The rise of Clovis. Anakin's hatred of Clovis strains his relationship with Padme. And Crisis at the Heart. Rush Clovis's deal with the Separatists backfires. So, Logan, I guess give me your general thoughts here on the return of Clovis, who we saw a few weeks back, and the fact that Padme still sort of trusted Clovis after the last arc that had him in there, and I guess Anakin's reaction to Clovis. Give me all your thoughts here.
Yes, I'm going to make a Ted Lasso reference here, but I know that's not the right podcast. But yeah, I think Clovis or Padme, we're one Padme death away from this being a really interesting divorce case where basically Anakin goes off to fight in his little fun war as the Empire, and then Padme being stuck at home with the kids, Luke and Leia, and they have to separate, and then she ends up with Clovis, and then Clovis seems to be that ex that's just always kind of hanging out in the shadows, waiting for the moment to finally court, I guess, Padme and marry Padme. And so that's an alternate universe that I was living in. Because as I'm watching these episodes, Jordan, Anakin is jealous, but I think for the right reasons. I think Padme still has an eye for Clovis. I think Clovis is the one that got away. He's just the bad boy. And I don't know, Anakin's
Ooh,
very
talk about
angry.
bad boy. Anakin's a very
Yeah, I
bad
was going to say,
boy.
Anakin's like
she
the
she has a
upgraded
type.
version. Right. Clovis seems much more grounded. And in this episode, we actually get an interesting character arc with Clovis because he's playing the good and the bad in moments, it seems. And I don't know. I like Clovis a lot better than I do Anakin with Padme. I do like Anakin better,
Ooh,
but
what a hot
I,
take.
I know, right? I don't know. I have a really good feeling about Clovis when he showed up, and I don't know. Maybe he's a charming guy, and maybe that's why. Um, I've
You
kind
know,
of
I do think like Clovis had good. He wanted good stuff here, right? Like he
yeah.
wasn't. I'm evil. Um, he believes in the actual banks and the banking system, but what happens is he's getting manipulated by Dooku and Palpatine to get turned into like, hey, you want to be in charge of them, right? And then when he is, they're like, well, you have to do this or else, like, and he ends up having to betray Padme uh, again. You sent me a text, what like when you were watching these about like how Padme, what would you say? Padme was like for trusting Clovis again or something.
Yeah, I think she said something along the lines of like she's just that bad, or he's that bad person that you just keep going back to, kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
but I can't find it. We text a lot, so I'm trying to find it, but I can't remember
Yeah, because
exactly what.
I think it was like midweek or something.
Yeah, I've got like House of Dragon. I'm talking about. Oh, here it is. God, Padme didn't choose right.
Oh, so you were talking
Clovis.
about
Yeah,
choosing Clovis instead of
yeah.
Anakin. Oh,
Anakin.
okay.
Yeah, yep.
I
And
thought
hello to
maybe
your
you thought
hello to
maybe
your
you meant
boss
like
if she's listening to the show.
yeah.
That's in that same thread.
I thought maybe you were saying about like she had chose wrong for trusting him
Oh no no no
or something.
no.
No, you meant like okay, like she chose the wrong guy.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I
You know who
typos.
you know who chose the right guy? Palpatine. He sent my boy Embo, the bounty hunter, to go
Yeah, he did.
after these people in the first episode. I liked seeing Embo again, and he's got like that wolf dog thing. Really cool. Um, but that whole we had a whole scene at the end of an old friend, right? That had
Mhm.
Embo chasing them. It was like on ice and all this stuff. It was pretty cool scene. But Palpatine's like, "Hey, you did a good job. Like, I'll deal with them myself now." And Embo hopefully lives on and
Mm.
doesn't die. um, so let's see. Any other thing that's sticking out to me about this particular arc? Oh, I was gonna say I really want to dive more into Anakin's thing with Clovis, right? Anakin's reaction. Clovis takes the high ground here, right? Like Anakin attacks him,
Doesn't do
force
well
chases
with.
him, and starts just walloping on him. And when the guards come in and stuff, Clovis is like, "Oh no, as an attacker, he fled out and Master Skywalker saved me." It's like, all right, I see what you're doing, Clovis, but. And this is where Padme tells Anakin to stay away, and really is kind of the first time she ever questions their marriage, right? You talk about divorce, um, kind of the first time she questions their marriage and says she can't see him anymore, which I have a little issue with Padme. It's like you know before you married him, he killed a whole bunch of Tusken Raiders, and that was
Right.
fine. Wife and children, all that stuff, that
Yeah.
was fine. But this beating up on Clovis uh, was too much for her. But I will say, I think maybe she thought that was a one-time thing with the Tusken Raiders because they were the people that killed his mom. Kind of understandable, right? But also, it's like we start to see the descent more of Anakin, right? There's no
Mhm.
Ahsoka holding him back now, right? This whole
Yeah.
season doesn't feature Ahsoka, and you have him start going a little bit down a darker path because he doesn't have somebody to kind of pull his reins a bit. And Anakin and Obi-Wan talk about his feelings and his hatred for Clovis. Obi-Wan even feels the hatred for Clovis, and he's kind of telling him, dude, you gotta figure this out type of thing. But it's not as hitting it doesn't hit him as well with Obi-Wan because he has like a brother relationship with Obi-Wan compared to Ahsoka, where he was trying to mentor her and be like, this is what you're supposed to do, follow my lead type of thing. Um, so what about that? How about our descent into Anakin here as we get closer and closer to the timeline of Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, and with these episodes that we've watched with the character arc and Anakin really being a focus now because we're leading up to Revenge of the Sith. It's hard because you have to balance Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith and what you know from there, and you're trying to kind of go, okay, like I know we're in between, but also there's things that are happening in that storyline that I think they're using in Clone Wars, and it feels very like you got to remember kind of where those two movies, and it might have benefited me more to go watch Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith again before, because they kind of converge at like a common area, especially with, I think probably as we get to season 7, there's going to be a lot of that where it just kind of collides, and which is cool. But I think it confuses me because it's like, okay, what do we know right now? At what point are we in? Because right now it's also, you got to think of in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith that Palpatine and he's having these conversations with Padme, and he's having these conversations with Anakin. So you get all these things, but I mean, diving deeper into Anakin, I think it's interesting because you can start to see his distrust in everything that is the system, that he considers the system. And Padme is also like, dude, we've got this system in place, which is always strange to me because I didn't ever really like, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I don't ever really like the fact that Padme just seems to be not okay, but like content with the fact that Anakin has done these things, because she is such a righteous person in 1 and then leading into 2. Like, she is the senator that they all kind of lean towards because she's the most honest. She cares about people, and then all of a sudden she just forgets that she cares about people. It's a strange dynamic, and I hope we get more Like, I'd love a Padme series where we get more development of like what's going on internally with her, because we don't really ever get internal. We get a lot of external with her conflict with Anakin, and then that kind of leaks into this Clovis arc where she's confiding in Clovis that maybe she did choose wrong, and I think she's having that second, that doubt. I think where Anakin's done a couple things, and she's kind of like, whoa, that's not normal.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like she met Anakin when he was 9.
That's
She was 14,
that's true.
right? And they, for whatever reason, kind of bonded, right? And then there was a 10-year gap where they didn't see each other. And then literally probably episode 2 Attack of the Clones probably takes place over the course of a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide to get married. It is literally like some of those
Kids that
people
just
that
get
just
married.
get married
Yeah.
right away, like almost like a Vegas wedding, right? And then
Yeah.
they barely actually spend any time together,
Right.
right? Like she and him, like, yeah, they'll spend some time together, but he's fighting a war and she's dealing with stuff in the Senate. They spend enough time for her to get pregnant, and that's pretty much all they probably do because they're young and in love. And
Yeah.
I think she was a little blinded by that. Plus, also, it's like I do wonder, do other people see Tusken Raiders as people? Right? We know from Book of Boba Fett they actually are like an intelligent race that
Mhm.
um that Boba Fett will protect and live with for a bit. But originally, in the original, like episode 4, A New Hope, and anytime they appeared before that, they were kind of talked about more of almost being like animals.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, like,
Savages.
right, when Anakin says, you slaughtered them like animals, it's like, are we supposed to feel that that is dark? Yes, I do think that is the case. But like you said, Padme kind of, swipes it under the rug. I was just watching Friends last night, Logan, and the relationship dynamics of that reminds me of this, because I'm going to give you names here. Okay, ready? Padme is Rachel.
Hmm.
Anakin is Ross.
Yeah.
And Clovis is Mark. And
Hey.
I was just watching the arc where Ross
Yes.
was so upset about anytime they mentioned Mark, and that's how
Yep.
it felt with the Clovis stuff. It's like,
That's great.
Mark?
Yeah.
Clovis?
Yeah. The gift basket. How dare
Yeah.
he? Yeah. Yeah. It just shows up randomly, like
How
doesn't
he
trust her.
walks in as he's like trying to force himself on kissing her too. It was like very like, oh my god, this is exactly like the Ross Rachel Mark
Yeah. I
arc.
was just waiting for Ross to bring out a saber. It's like,
Yeah,
I'll show you, Bella. That's a great
Unagi.
comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I watched those episodes last night, or else I would have been like,
I
how do
love
I
that.
relate this to something else? But so you're pretty basic triangle here, but very similar in the respect to how like Anakin reacts to Clovis. It is very similar to how Ross reacts to Mark. If you haven't watched Friends, though, Ross does not beat up on Mark. He's just very upset anytime he's mentioned, and that's kind of how Anakin is with Clovis all the time. So I just thought that was a pretty apt comparison. Um, the planet's name, by the way, that they go to, Scipio. Not a fan. Not a fan of that name. It's a weird planet name.
Yeah, that's a bad one. They
It
don't
sounds like
often use
something
it though.
I know. It sounds like something I would have made when I was like in middle school and be like, this is a great name for a planet. Because look, some of my names for characters and stuff when I was writing, I wrote this fantasy series as a kid. It was pretty much a ripoff of Harry Potter and Lord of the
Hmm.
Rings combined, okay? With Star Wars a little bit.
Well,
And like they were dressed in tunics like the
yeah.
Jedi robes. But they were Rangers, which is taken from the Lord of the Rings series, and they used magic spells, which was taken from both Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Okay, and one of the villains I made, I must have thought this was a great name. I was just throwing letters together, and now it sounds so funny, and I use it still sometimes just for fun. Is the character named Gertis Fertile? Like, what the hell type of name is that? That's what Scipio reminded me of. I was like, oh, this is a name I would have made when I
Yeah,
was in middle school, and then like be like, oh, this is a great name.
yeah. It's like you were the writers that wrote Boy Meets World. They chose Minkus, if you've seen Boy Meets World, as
Oh
the
yes,
nerdy type child
Minkus.
because yeah, because you would just laugh at that name and you're like, what name is that? But it had to sound so out of normal and out of touch. It like that. That's the you knew that that was the person you needed. So it's funny that you chose that as a villain because I just laugh. It sounds like you're choking on
Yeah,
something when you say that.
Gertis Fertile. I don't know. It
Garbage
sounds like yeah.
turtle.
It
Your
sounds like
garbage
somebody.
disposal.
It sounds like somebody acting to do like the Swedish Chef from the Muppets, where they're
Yeah.
like Gertis Fertile. That's what it sounds like.
Yep.
But I thought it was this badass goblin name when I was a kid.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Oh boy. Yeah, that's what Scipio reminds me of. But anyway, Palpatine's whole play here is he's going to get power over the Banks, right?
Mhm.
Clovis gives himself up so that way Anakin can save Padme when they're in this situation. And their whole idea was originally make it look like Clovis planned all of this and then give it a reason for the Chancellor to have complete control over the Banks. Um, is about and what I mean by planning all of this is like this whole invasion of Scipio was supposed to make it look like this came from the banking clan, I guess. I don't know, but this is because Dooku is pretty much like, I need you to raise interest rates on the Republic or else I will ruin your life, pretty much. I forget what the exact words is, but that's pretty much what the last episode of this arc is dealing with. Yoda and Mace are like, well, maybe Anakin was right about not trusting Clovis. Um, which it's like, all right, he was right on not trusting Clovis, but not for the reasons he didn't trust Clovis, because Clovis actually had okay intentions here. But and I think Anakin picks that up at the end here a little bit when Clovis sacrifices himself for Padme to be saved by Anakin instead of Anakin trying to save both of them. But at the end, Palpatine gets what he wants. He has full control over the Banks.
It is interesting because I was thinking about this too. Because this is what dictators have done in the past. I know Hitler did it as the banks were failing in Germany. He took over the banks, and that's what every dictator will do because they can influence and then structure how the economy is based off of their rule and their power.
Yep.
Um, so I just think about this all the time when I'm watching shows of that each show and we can kind of get into that in different episodes, but there's so much research and I'd love to meet the people that do the research for some of this stuff because while you have writers, there is a writer or a particular person that is set out to do some research on different things that they influence their
Yeah,
writing with.
usually like an assistant
Yeah,
or like an actual researcher, depending on what the position. Like for Clone Wars, probably an assistant or
yeah,
just drawing off of the fact that George already related a lot of this stuff to World War II and to
right,
like Vietnam and stuff. Like, did you know Newt Gunray, the
okay,
Trade
yeah,
Federation
yep.
person, is actually named after Newt Gingrich, the
Is he really?
Republican? Yes.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean George was not very subtle with
Yeah.
some of this stuff. Um, but yeah, so with Clone Wars, either an assistant or the writer themselves would probably be like, "Oh, that's something Hitler did." But yeah, like some shows that deal with like, let's say you're looking at something like Criminal Minds or something, where the
Mhm.
writers are not actually versed in that stuff. They usually have somebody that is like a a forensic analyst or like a some behavioral analyst like Criminal Minds that would be like,
Yeah.
oh, reading scripts and be like, no, this is not how we would do it. We would do
Right.
this and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, really interesting the way it works with TV. Like I know for Miss Marvel on for the MCU, like they had a scientist that was
Oh,
familiar with like time travel and stuff like that worked on the show. Um, and worked with like particles on like how she would do certain things. So uh, yeah, they'll hire people like that. It's
mhm.
really really cool.
Yeah, I know that Grey's Anatomy, for instance, they have medical and surgeons that are
Yeah,
retired that'll read over their scripts and be like, "That's, the terminology. Obviously, it's more dramatized, and it's always going to be, but they're
yeah,
like,
and
oh
that's
yeah,
the
no,
thing
that's
too.
not the right word."
I know people have like specifically for Grey's Anatomy have pointed out things that were incorrect on that show, and it's like they can only do so much, right? Like
Right.
the person preventing it can only do so much because, like you said, some of it's dramatized. They'll be like, "No, that works. Like, we'll
Yeah.
just keep it like this type of thing," or
Yep.
it's just um, like medical gibberish. Like nobody needs to know what we're actually doing type of thing.
Right.
So sometimes they leave it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the disappeared part one and disappeared part two. Some of the first time is this one of the first times we've actually had two episodes named part one and part two? Usually
There's
an
a couple
arc.
of them. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's
so
or no.
usually an arc is like three different names, and they'll just be like, "Oh, it's this arc." But yeah, this one's literally part one, part two.
Yeah, I think there's two. I think there's another one, but I can't remember which one it is. And I like because I only remember it because it'll say like to be continued. There's definitely another one, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I was trying to like quickly search my Google Notes for part one, but it doesn't say it even
Maybe there's
finds the
not.
one instance of it, which exists. So I don't understand why why it would say that. It says, let's see, there's 13 uses of the word part in my documents. But a lot of times it's me typing it in my notes.
Right. I'll go
No,
through
this is
that.
the first time.
Is it really?
Yeah. Oh, it couldn't find part one because I did part, I did part and then capital I. But then for the next one, I did part and then actual numeral two. So,
Okay. I'm going through the IMDb just to check.
oh yeah,
Before.
double check me on that because my notes could be wrong. So we have the disappeared part one, which is directed by Stuart Lee and written by Jonathan W. Rinsler, who also wrote part two, and it was directed by Bosco Ing. Part two was, but I wanted to highlight Jonathan Rinsler here. He passed away in 2021 at the age of 58, but he wrote these two episodes, and he actually wrote. I knew him from he wrote making of books for Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And actually he was trying to make one for The Force Awakens, and Disney did not let him have access. Um, that's one thing that George was a lot better at, was access to this stuff. But he wrote like the making of Star Wars, which was a huge book series um, that he wrote. He passed away sadly to pancreatic cancer in 2021. Um, but yeah, so he only 58, but he wrote these two episodes. I thought that was very interesting because he's usually more of a nonfiction guy, writing the making of Star Wars, but here he is actually writing Star Wars. So, pretty cool little thing there. And the synopsises are: a prophecy threatens the spiritual balance of the mystic world. Jar Jar Binks and Mace Windu must find a missing queen. Also, really bad spelling error on here where it says "an prophecy." Should be a prophecy, because usually you only use "an" if it's another
Yeah,
vowel. I mean another vowel at the beginning
that is strange. I don't like when that happens. That and two really that
there.
bugs
Mm-hmm.
me. When
Yeah,
people use it wrong, I'm like, oh no.
I know. I get upset when I accidentally misspell it that way too, and I hit send before it's done. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, on the phone, I don't really blame people because I do it all the time. My fingers are
Yeah,
just
yeah,
too like I hit too many keys, and now the autocorrect thing that where it auto finishes now that's so stupid. But
yeah, yeah.
but there is
We
no Jordan. There is no part one
sound
or part two. I know we sound. obnoxious,
Sounds so
pretentious.
boomerish.
Yeah. The disappeared part one and part two are the only part one and part two in the whole
That's
series.
odd. I
It
wonder if
is
that's
weird.
like a if that was a Rinsler thing then, since he named
You,
these maybe, or if it
you
was
know,
written as one part or what.
they probably got to the editing and the final, submission to wherever they're submitting it to, and they went, ah, shoot, we forgot a title. Just slap part two on
Yeah, part one, part
it.
two, done.
Damn,
Um,
knew we were forgetting something.
so Jar Jar is asked to go to a specific planet by the Queen, and everybody's like, "What? Jar Jar is being asked to go there? It doesn't make any sense." Mace forces himself to go along here. They didn't want any Jedi to go, but Mace forces his way in here. Jar Jar tells him he's known the Queen for a long time, and she flips out. She's like, "Why is Mace Windu here?" She doesn't say. She's like, "Why is there a Jedi here?" She allows it because Jar Jar is friends, but she tells Mace Windu he has to step out for them to talk, and then she kind of drops the royalties a bit, and it's just talking with Jar Jar. She then asks for Jar Jar to speak to her alone, and we get them kissing. Logan, we get a little love story for Jar Jar here. And you know what I thought was funny here is, I don't know if you noticed this, he did the raised foot. You know how like girls will like the
Yeah.
stereotypical thing,
Yep.
if you're kissing
Your
a girl,
foot
like
pop.
they'll raise their foot off the ground.
Yeah.
Jar Jar did that in this. I thought that
Yep.
was really funny. Give me your thoughts on the love story for Jar Jar and the Queen here.
I don't
Your
know if it's
favorite
the first.
characters.
Yeah, right. I don't know if it's the first time that it happens, but I know that the foot raising comes from Princess Diaries because I used to watch that. I loved Princess Diaries, and then it's the when they're saying that she's like, when you meet somebody that you love, your foot will pop, and that's the first time I can remember it ever
Yes.
being. And then
Yeah.
after that, everybody's used it, and even it's been subtle nods. But anyway, back to Jar Jar Binks. Princess Diaries better than Jar Jar, but yeah, no, I don't know. This was a really strange episode uh, or episodes. I don't like the character arcs where they obviously have Mace or Jar Jar Binks, and it just seems like they throw them in there because they have to satisfy the Jar Jar Binks fans and the Mace fans. Um, but I don't know, it just
I don't think
never
there's
feels like
many
it.
Jar Jar fans. I think it's like we need some slapstick comedy, and you're
Yeah,
gonna throw Jar Jar in there.
but again, it was either that or the droids, and to be quite honest with you, like I love the droids, but their episode
Yeah.
arcs really suck in this show.
Well, one thing I didn't like about Mace Windu in this is how he tries to sneak in. Pretty much, he
Yeah,
tries a mind trick and it doesn't work, and they're like, "Dude, you know it shouldn't work on us."
dude. Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, can't you just respect that the ruler of this planet doesn't want you in there? Like, you're supposed to be a peacekeeper. Like, relax a second.
And of the highest
Um,
characters, like that's what confuses me about Jedi sometimes.
yeah. But one thing that did come, it was a big thing in the Disappeared Part 2, was that we get Mother Talzin returning from the Night Sisters, and she's going there for some sort of orb that has power in it that people were using to turn some of these people invisible. Um, so they face off. Mace Windu and Talzin face off. She becomes like dust. I don't know if she's actually dead or not yet. Well, I think she is. I have no clue. If they killed her off in the Jar Jar arc, it's kind of like, what? You could have killed her off any other time. Kill her off in the Jar Jar arc. But that's the Disappear Part 1 and Part 2. There wasn't much to talk about here, I don't think. Some silly stuff, but also some stuff where it's just like, Jar Jar stumbling into activating these old rock droid type stuff and knocking off the sphere unintentionally and it breaking. Just, the typical stuff for Jar Jar. And then Mace Windu being his typical hard headed
Yeah,
self. So,
I thought it was strange when Mace goes at the end of the episode, part two. He turns to Jar Jar and he goes, "So this is why they send you on missions." And I'm like, when is he ever like? He's usually with Padme. Like he's not usually the one.
I
I
guess
would
he
never
means
send Jar
I
Jar
guess he
Binks.
means the other episodes
I
that we've seen of him.
guess.
But
I guess. But it always goes wrong whenever he shows
yeah,
up.
well, that was such a weird line from Mace because it's like you do know that like Jar Jar does all of this unintentionally.
Mhm.
Like all of this
Yeah.
stuff that he stumbles into is totally by accident, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, so this is why they send you because you're like a good luck charm
Right.
almost." It
Yeah,
was
he
a
really
weird.
is. Do we ever know what happens to him?
Jar Jar.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm assuming he's killed, but I mean,
no, I believe he's still alive. Not like still alive.
but
But
lives through the war.
yeah, like we see him at Padme's funeral in episode 3. Um, and then I forget where else he's appeared other than that. But let me take a look at the old Wikipedia.
Because he's one of the ones that you don't ever really get a good answer for. Like everybody, I mean, Caddy Moody, hell, he's showing up wherever he can. The guy is a cameo
Yeah,
king, but
happy birthday to Kiadi Mundi, by the way.
yeah, he's like
Uh,
1,200 years old.
let's see here. Jar Jar. Yeah, so he is Age of the Empire. Um, it's what is this from?
You think he's one of those people that shows up to like different like outposts and different, like cantinas and is like one of those where people think he's just crazy because he's talking about all these people that he knows and they're like, yeah, right. Like you don't know the
Yeah,
Jedi.
I was friends with the Jedi. It's
Misa
like,
friends with the
yeah,
Jedi.
you're what? Um, so it looks like he was still around at the oh, that's right. He was still around at the end of the Battle of Endor.
Yeah.
He was actually performing in the streets of Theed, which is in Naboo,
Okay.
as a clown who was popular with children, but not so much
Makes
with their
sense.
parents, which was a reference to that. But I believe that was in the Afterlife books, with the Afterlife trilogy, which took place right after, like 6 years after Battle of Endor, or in the run up of that he was mentioned. Oh no, it may have been he was mentioned on. Oh yeah, Aftermath. It was the Aftermath. I said Afterlife. Aftermath books, Empire's End. He's referenced, uh, which was a very sad reference at the end there. But so he's still alive. Still alive. Still alive. I am messing up everything today. I did not.
That's the first one I've noticed.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Maybe nobody else noticed. I almost said mentioned again. See, I'm really stumbling now. Okay,
Now you
so
have.
we're gonna
Now you're.
we're
Now
gonna
you're
end
thinking
this.
about it.
We're gonna end this episode with those Jar Jar episodes. Next week we're talking a 4-pack here. We have The Lost One, Voices, Destiny, and Sacrifice, which is a Yoda arc with the Force that we will cover in the next episode. Have a great rest of your week. You can follow us at podawakens for all of our social media, and podawakens@gmail.com.